Some of you have asked me to talk about Chester Bennington, and I didn't really want to go down that path because you get very deep in the weeds very quick, and there's so many rumors and so much, I believe, disinformation out there. A lot of it intentional to muddy the waters, much like the Cornell case. But a channel that I watch did cover it pretty thoroughly. So I thought I would summarize some of that and show some new connections I made and small little anecdotes that came to mind regarding Chris Cornell that I had not really put together previously. Now, a lot of the information I'm going to be talking about comes from this channel here from rumble.com. Rumble is kind of like a rival to YouTube, which I think you should support because they don't censor the way YouTube does. And this channel is called Badlands Media. Now, I'm warning you, this is a very Trump-friendly channel. So I don't care what your politics are. I hope you don't care what mine are. But I'm just telling you that when you watch these videos, there might be a little bit of pro-Trump talk going on. So if that bothers you, you've been warned. So they did this series. They have this show called Baseless Conspiracies, which is one of my favorite shows right now. It's just... they cover all kinds of great stuff. And this guy here, Zach, actually both these guys, John Harold and Zach Payne, are both really good researchers, definitely better than me and much more articulate. So you want to look for episode 103 through 107. Now, some of these episodes, they digress into other topics, so you may have to fast forward if you're not interested in the topic, but it's all about these red scarf deaths, which is basically all these different deaths, a lot of them having to do with, child trafficking or, alleged knowledge of child trafficking or child abuse or something like that. Famous people stepping on the toes of, quote unquote, important elitists. And this guy, Zach, goes way, way, way into it. So I'm only really going to cover the part that pertains to Cornell and Bennington. Most people know about Chester Bennington from his time in the band Linkin Park, which I guess started around the year 2000. I was never a big fan. That's kind of why I didn't really follow much of what happened to him. But that's not to say that I didn't notice and that I didn't care. I just never really looked into it. So he was good friends with Chris Cornell, who I did a bunch of blogs about. I'll put a link to the one that talks about the evidence in the official, report. And the evidence shows that Chris Cornell it doesn't show that he was murdered, but it leans a lot more towards murder to anyone who looks at it objectively. It does not lean towards suicide. So that's already fishy right there. And then his good friend Chester Bennington dies supposedly in the same manner on what would have been Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday. As I said previously, to me, this is the murderer telling you that, yes, we murdered him, and yes, we did it right in front of your face, and what the fuck are you going to do about it? Nothing. We're told that he was born in 1976 to a mother who worked as a nurse. Now, they don't give her name. I found out her name by asking ChatGPT, actually, which is an artificial intelligence app you can download and have interesting conversations with. And according to ChatGPT, Chester Bennington's mother was Susan Elaine Johnson. And I found one single picture of her, which I think this is her. I don't know if it is, but that looks like it could be Chester Bennington. This could be a fake picture. I don't know. It's out on the internet. So all we know is that she was a nurse. According to Zach of Badlands, there are, I guess, rumors that she was politically involved and may have been involved with the Clintons somehow. But I don't know where he got that information. I couldn't find anything substantiating that. I think that there's definitely a will to cover up Chester Bennington's background and who his parents were. I know that by looking them up and finding absolutely nothing or close to nothing. We're told his dad was a cop or some type of investigator who investigated child sexual abuse. And we're told that his father's name is Lee Russell Bennington. It's a little easier to find out information about him, although what I just told you is about what we know about him, or that what we're told. I mean, this could all be bullshit. We can't take for granted the fact that, just because we see it online, and even just because someone says it, even if Chester Bennington says that this was his dad, that doesn't mean it's true. But we can use, our common sense and our judgment. I mean, you look at them, and yeah, they look alike. Yeah, that's possible. Here's another picture that is floating around the internet. His dad's a little older. And here is a picture of Chester Bennington's face next to John Podesta. Now, John Podesta was involved with the Clintons politically. He's a name that's out there in politics. And people have made the connection between him and Chester Bennington, first of all, because they look strikingly similar. That doesn't mean that they're related, but, obviously there's a similarity there. I haven't been able to find anything that confirms their connection. Neither has Zach, although Zach put forth an interesting possibility that if Chester Bennington's mother was involved with the Clinton campaign or the Clintons somehow, which we can't substantiate anywhere, but if she was, theoretically she may have bumped into John Podesta, because I guess John Podesta met Bill Clinton in 1970. And they were friends, and they've been involved in various ways over the years. Now, the other reason why people like to connect Chester Bennington to John Podesta is because there are lots of rumors about John Podesta and the Clinton Foundation being involved in some type of child trafficking or something like that, particularly with their activity in Haiti. Like I said, you get stuck in the weeds very quickly here. You start trying to make connections, and then you've got to verify each individual connection that you're making, and it gets real messy. And in the end, it ends up making you look less credible unless you really know what you're talking about and you've got some solid facts. What I can say for sure, confidently, is there's a lot of mystery enshrouding all this. I don't know that Chester Bennington's related to Podesta. He might be. The fact that he was sexually abused as a child, I don't know if that makes it more valid or not valid. But what I do find really strange is that, according to Wikipedia here, Bennington didn't reveal that he was molested by a friend of the family or something until years later, and then chose not to reveal the guy's name or press charges. Now, the reason that's really weird is because if you're Chester Bennington's father and you're a guy that spent your career investigating child sexual abuse, you don't want to do anything about that. You don't want to put this guy's name out there. I mean, to me, that equates to protecting the person. Why would you want to protect someone who abused your son? I mean, part of the reason why a lot of this child abuse and child trafficking and pedophilia isn't more well known is because everyone's afraid to talk about it. Some people are afraid to talk about it because they're ashamed. Some people are afraid to talk about it because they're afraid of retaliation. But I think number one is that the most important people who could talk about it, don't want to talk about it because they don't want their own guilt revealed. And so, the media, being financed and run by a lot of very powerful people who probably are pedophiles, of course has a bias against revealing pedophilia. So just remember, when you see these stories about P. Diddy or whoever, they're always very hesitant to use the word pedophilia and to talk about trafficking of underage because they much prefer to use words like sexual abuse or, even rape. These are all preferable to pedophilia. And you notice how they like to keep that word out of their articles because the media is protecting the pedophiles. You notice the Ghislaine Maxwell thing and the Epstein thing. You don't know anything about the hundreds of thousands of whatever high-level and low-level perpetrators that they obviously dealt with. They throw someone like Bill Cosby under the bus or P. Diddy, and these individuals probably are guilty of exactly what they're being accused of or what we think they are. But the thing is, they have to throw them under the bus to satiate the masses. So we feel like, oh, justice gets done once in a while. See? Given the lack of information regarding Chester Bennington's parents, most people will just not think about it. I'll never know, so what's the point of putting effort into that? I don't need to, obsess on different theories and then get labeled a conspiracy theorist and, not really help anyone out and just play the clown. But the thing is, there is a way to step back and look at the big picture and see trends. And, this is something people do in finance all the time. And some people who are very good at finance can predict things and figure things out in that same manner. But for some reason, when you apply that to a real life situation, like with Chester Bennington, there's a lot more bias against that way of thinking, because probably it can lead to places where there are individuals who don't want to be found out. Now, all that being said, I don't know if this supposed father of Chester Bennington was a sketchy character or not, but I do know that sexual predators, now this is really tricky because you have to think like a sexual predator, which is impossible if you're not one. But if you just think like a criminal in general, like if I was a criminal and the crime that I wanted to commit was, against children, I'd have to be in close proximity to children often, and I would have to not be suspected of doing that. In other words, I'd want to have a reputation as an upstanding citizen. Well, who are the least likely to harm children who are in a position to do just that? Well, that would be people involved with charitable organizations such as the Clinton Foundation, going over to Haiti, a third world country where there are many, many, many vulnerable children, and in some cases with parents that are willing to give them over for money. And this is the case not just in Haiti, but in a lot of third world countries. You hear about a lot of these children coming across our southern border, and the media will tell you, oh, they're taking them away from their families, blah, blah, blah. Well, a lot of their quote-unquote families, or the people accompanying them, aren't actually family members. Some of these individuals who pose as a father, an uncle, or whatever, a lot of these people have been found to be traffickers. So in that sense, they're basically lying to you. They're getting you to actually be cool with the trafficking, all the trafficking they're doing. So the point of bringing that up is that, maybe Chester Bennington's childhood abuse was actually connected with his dad's profession. Maybe there was a connection there that we just never know about, and they just sort of keep everything murky and quiet and dark so that we can't know anything about it, so we can never make that connection. Because if we did, we'd be able to make other connections and maybe figure out why he was murdered, and that might connect with Chris Cornell, and on and on and on. And, if you read books or watch lectures from people who claim to be survivors of sexual trafficking or MKUltra, people like Kathy O'Brien, who wrote the book Transformation in the 90s, where she talks about being abused by the Clintons sexually. She was sent around to different politicians. Dick Cheney was another one. I think Reagan was another one. She got sent around as a sex slave, but she was also carrying drugs sometimes, and perhaps getting information from these individuals and passing it on. These are real things that the CIA did. You look into MKUltra, and a lot of this stuff came out in trials. Operation Midnight Climax, I believe, was one of those, if you want to look up that word. Operation Midnight Climax. And these victims are sometimes part of multi-generational abuse families. And so what I'm trying to get to here is that I think what Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington may have in common is they may both have been part of multi-generational abuse families. Now, again, I don't know that his father and mother, are bad people, abusers, and I don't know that Chris Cornell's parents are bad people or abusers. Although, in Chris Cornell's case, he certainly doesn't have very many kind words to say about his father. The way Chris Cornell describes his father is very similar to how Rocky Erickson's father comes off. just stone-faced man, drinks heavily, doesn't say a word, and if he does say a word, it meant your ass. It was better, he didn't say a word. Now, in Rocky Erickson's case, one of Rocky Erickson's brothers did hint in the movie You're Gonna Miss Me, the documentary from 2007. One of the brothers did hint that someone walked in on the father in the bedroom with one of the brothers, and the hint was that there was something off going on. In other words, sexual abuse. So you find this a lot with famous people who are very damaged. So Zach from Badlands Media started talking about this thing that I may have heard about in the past, but because there's absolutely no information to find, it kind of probably just went in one ear and out the other. But there's this page, Total Disclosure, which seems to be talking about it. And I don't know if this is the page that, is the original spreader of this information, or if it was Crazy Days and Nights, Blind Items, which is a page that actually gave my Chris Cornell blog a lot of boost. So I'm thankful for that. I've looked at some of the blind items, and some of it does seem legit. However, I haven't looked at it enough to really know. I can't categorically just say, yeah, that's all legit. Anyhow, as far as I can tell, this is just some rumor that cannot be substantiated, because either it wasn't a real thing, or all the back information on it has been scrubbed from the internet. Anyhow, it's something about a charity organization called Luminary Lane, which was, I guess, started by Chester Bennington and involved Chris Cornell and Anthony Bourdain and Brad Pitt and Rick Rubin. Now, I haven't gotten any information as to what this organization was about. Supposedly it was named after Lane Staley, who died of a heroin overdose, so I don't know if it's about trying to get people to recover from heroin. Lane's name is spelled Layne, I think. So Luminary Lane, Lane, that's kind of weird. I don't know that really makes sense. Rick Rubin, I highly doubt that man. I mean, hey, I'm a big admirer of Rick Rubin's work, but let's face it, he's as satanic Hollywood as they get in terms of his involvement and his power and his influence as a producer over the years. So I just have a real hard time seeing that guy as being benevolent at all. You're just talking about music, okay, yeah, he's a guy I'd love to have a beer with and talk about music. But, as far as his connections and such, I'm sure he's as dark as they come. And, of course, Anthony Bourdain, there's that whole thing, his death, and what was that all about? And I'm sure he was murdered. Supposedly this was some connection between all these guys. I haven't been able to find out anything about it, except for from sites like this, like Total Disclosure, which, when you call your site something like that, it almost makes me doubt you more. It has a very tabloid feel that it makes you feel like, you shouldn't trust anything on it. But, and one real motivation for sites like this, even when they're very, high production value and they look really clean and everyone talks really good. I mean, there's organizations like this that get paid specifically to mislead people like me or you. So you just never know. You got to be very careful with this stuff. And again, I was hesitant to cover a lot of this because I don't want to be part of the problem, but it's out there. People talk about it. And occasionally I think it is important to address, just remind ourselves to be mindful when we're digging for stuff, to not just automatically believe everything, because, not everything is true just because it's interesting. And it sort of makes sense in our head. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. And we got to remember that the evil perpetrators out there, they know exactly how to mislead us. They're very intelligent with what they do. Now, here are screenshots that Zach presented, which are supposedly of tweets that Chester Bennington's wife, Talinda Bennington, posted right after he died. This is July 2017. He didn't kill himself. He was already dead before he hung himself. I have proof. This reminds me of a lot of what I believe are AI posts that are done online to try and look like they're a person typing really fast, and oops, I put did instead of dead. It just feels very fake to me. Here's a group of the tweets, which I guess were apparently deleted shortly after posting them. I never really loved him, and I'm not hacked. I just was in love with the money, hurts to say. He didn't kill himself. He was already dead before he hung himself. I have proof. I guess this is the time to say it, but I have been cheating on Chester with Mike Shinoda. I mean, I don't doubt that this may have been posted on her account right after Chester Bennington died, and I'll tell you why. For the exact reason I just explained a minute ago. To put disinformation out there and to throw people off. Now, this has echoes of the Cornell aftermath. Remember that track marks story that TMZ put out after Chris Cornell died? They said some guy from the EMT or the ambulance or whatever saw track marks on his body. Well, it turns out those, quote, track marks were from a Narcan that was injected supposedly to revive him in case he had overdosed on opioids. So, the story comes out. Everyone goes, oh my God, Chris Cornell was a junkie. Of course he killed himself. I really believe it now. And then the shock wears off, and then the truth comes out later, and people aren't paying attention as much. You see how that works? Although there's a lot I don't know about the death of Chester Bennington, or that can be known, what can be known for sure is that there was a campaign to mislead people after he died. So that tells you, and this campaign is on a very large level, requires a lot of money. I mean, how do you get his wife to be cool with this? Or how do you pull something like this off without his wife later going, oh yeah, no, I was hacked, or don't pay attention to that. I don't know what happened there. I mean, maybe she did explain it later. I don't know. But, disinformation is a weapon, and that's why the media is constantly trying to project that normal people like you and me are out there using disinformation as a weapon, because that deflects from the fact that that's exactly what they're doing all the time. It's called projection. And again, a lot of people just don't have time for this stuff. Like, I don't want to think about all that. Well, that's how bad guys win, because you don't feel like looking at it. Someone has to play the clown and look at it and get made, fun of or whatever, or even viewed as the bad guy, or even get put in jail in some, they put someone in jail for making a meme recently or something. I don't know. It's crazy. So it's really an attack on free speech is what it is. All right, and here's some other post, a screenshot from a post. So I don't know if this is legit, but it's supposedly a screenshot from a guy, Chris Keene. So I've kept my mouth shut on this for a while due to fear of backlash, but fuck that. I'm letting it all out. Chris and Chester were murdered. I'm not buying this suicide shit for 1 minute. Anyone who knows about Chris and Chester knows they were best friends. Chester was even Chris's son's godfather. The two of them worked together in the Chris and Vicky Cornell Foundation, who helped prevent the sexual exploitation of vulnerable children. By the way, supposedly the Clinton Foundation donated to the Chris and Vicky Cornell Foundation. One of the biggest donors, if not the biggest, according to Zach. Anyway, let's keep going here. Chris also worked with the Clinton administration on a CPP services out of Haiti that was later found out to be a human trafficking ring. Several journalists who tried to break that story died suddenly. Rumor has it that these men had acquired a list of people in the mainstream media, the government, and the acting world who were involved in this human trafficking and pedophile ring. Chris apparently was about to blow the lid on this, coincidentally shortly after he's found dead. Fast forward to yesterday. In almost the exact same fashion, his best friend Chester Bennington is found dead. The exact same way as Chris was. Something is not adding up here, people. If Chris hung himself, then why does his autopsy report show that he had head trauma and 9 cracked ribs? Anyone who knows anything about singing knows that with 9 cracked ribs, it would be impossible to perform, thus making it impossible to have performed the night of his death. These are signs of a man fighting for his life. The Illuminati is real, people. Don't let them fool you. Okay, first of all, I don't need him to come out and legitimize the idea that, Chris Cornell, for example, didn't kill himself. All you have to do is look at the investigative report. It's available publicly to anyone who's American and requests it through the Freedom of Information Act process. Most people are just too fucking lazy to do that. But anyone who does it can look through it and see easily that Cornell, the evidence leans towards murder. It does not lean towards suicide. Anyone can see that. You don't need Chris Keene to come out and say it. And the reason I sound a little annoyed is because so many people feel like they need someone important to say that something's okay before they'll jump on board with it. And I'm guilty of it too. You know, I've been doing this for long enough to where I question almost everything on a scale that, you know, people might think is ridiculous. But that's when you see how much we get lied to every day, that's just what happens. You start questioning everything and you start realizing that it is a legitimately good exercise to question everything. I don't know if you call it the Socratic method or whatever. It's a method of questioning things to the degree where you're only left with the truth, or you've exhausted all the wrongs that are possible, and then now you have something you can't refute. This point about how he couldn't have sang with 9 cracked ribs, well, duh, they were cracked after the concert, and the excuse for that people put out there, oh well, he got CPR, and during CPR you can get cracked ribs. Okay, fine, but that doesn't mean that it's not excessive how many ribs were cracked. And in fact, Zach supports my theory. Now, Zach came to the reason why I'm talking about Zach so much is because he came to all the same conclusions I did by looking at the investigative report. And I don't know the guy. I don't think he saw my video. They have way more followers than me. I don't think he's combing through my videos. Let me just take all this guy's stuff and take credit for it. I don't believe he did that. I guess it's possible, but I'm not the only person out there noticing that it was fishy that the people that escorted Chris Cornell to his to the hotel after the show that night, we don't know who they are. Who were those individuals? I mean, Martin Kirsten we know, but who were the other police and individuals that escorted? Who was the individual that came from IT and went to Chris Cornell's room? And this is something that Zach noted as well. An IT individual did go to Chris Cornell's room. We don't know who that person is. So he surmised that, a couple individuals or a group of individuals probably beat Chris Cornell up and punched him in the ribs to stop him from resisting as they put the noose around his neck and choked him. And that's why there was so much blood all around the room. Because how many hangings have you heard of where there's blood pouring out of the mouth or splattering on the wall or splattering, there was blood splatter on Cornell's face and on the bathtub and on the ground. I mean, that's signs of struggle. Now, the gash on the back of his head, it's been a while since I looked at the report, but I believe it was the EMT that reported this. And here's a screenshot of it. I think I have a better copy of it somewhere, but this is an off-the-cuff episode. I didn't want to get super thorough about it. But I surmised that the wound on the back of the head may have been from them pulling on his noose on one side of the door while Chris Cornell hung on the other. And they pulled him so high that as he struggled, his head was hitting the back of the wall. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that they hit him in the head and, before subduing him and then choking him. And that head wound did not appear in the autopsy. So one reason for omitting that from the autopsy would be to cover it up, the idea of struggle, that a struggle had occurred. Because a struggle would obviously point towards murder. So how do you pull something like this off with so many people cooperating? I think that's what's so hard for people to believe. Like, oh, why would the cop, cooperate with this? Why would all the emergency staff cooperate? How come we haven't heard from blah, blah, blah? Well, money goes a long way, and so do threats. And if this was a hit from very high, which it has to have been, both of these hits, we're talking about a lot of people with a lot of money and a lot of power who have, number one, the ability to pay everyone off, and number two, the same ability to threaten everyone. And number three, the ability to, manipulate the media coverage of such a thing. And it's just very hard for a lot of people to wrap their brain around the idea that there are individuals with this kind of power that can do this. And as I said, the problem with the fact that people don't want to look into this and believe it is that that's how bad guys win. That's how they continue doing what they do. And that's why they are invested in making a clown out of certain people, emphasizing stereotypes, making quote-unquote truth seekers look bad even to the point of hiring podcasters and individuals like Alex Jones, who pose as truthers and who even may speak a lot of truth. Well, yeah, they know the truth because if the bad guys who are doing all the harm hire you, they know exactly what they did. So when they hire their person to pretend they're working for the good guys, that person has inside information, of course, because they're working for the bad guys. And then they're going out there and they're acting like a good guy, and I'm a good guy who's revealing everything and risking my life and blah, blah, blah. Well, no, you're not risking your life if you're on the side of the bad guys and you're just pretending, you know. I was hesitant to talk about Vicky Cornell initially because I didn't want to detract from the basic truth that there's no way Cornell hung himself in the manner they said. I didn't want any noise distracting from that, but some time has passed. I think enough people recognize the physical problems with the crime scene where Chris Cornell was murdered. Now, Zach pointed out some very interesting things that got me thinking. Number one, and I don't know if I believe this, but apparently there's a rumor out there that Vicky Cornell was cheating on Chris Cornell left and right. I don't know if that's true. The only reason I'm repeating this rumor about Vicky sleeping around, well, number one, it would give her a motive to be cool with cooperating with her husband's death, because it would show that her love for him is questionable. Number two, she stands to benefit financially because if they had a prenuptial agreement, which Zach says they did, the prenup allegedly didn't have her getting shit. And so if Cornell was planning on divorcing her, which Zach says he was, I don't know where he got that information. If that's all true, then she had a big motive to see him taken out. Also, David Geffen is mentioned by Zach. Now, Geffen is someone who's been on my radar for a while. I don't talk about him a lot because I just haven't spent sufficient time looking into him. I'm just throwing that out there, that I have a feeling he may have been involved somehow in this, and Kurt Cobain, which Courtney Love brought up Geffen's name in relation to Kurt Cobain. And according to Zach, Geffen had a share in Soundgarden's music or some type of ownership. So the point of mentioning him is that there's another person who probably benefits from Chris Cornell's death. These are perfectly logical questions to ask when someone, is dead, especially if you know that they were murdered. A wife, a business associate. Even if you don't have proof, you should be able to ask these questions to at least entertain it. That's what any competent investigator would do. Same with Martin Kirsten. First person to see him dead, last person to see him alive. That's suspect number one right there. I mean, he probably did it. Anyhow, what this is all leading up to is the fact that how did Chris Cornell Jr. get blonde hair? And you know what? Does he even look like Chris Cornell? I mean, I can look at Tony and I can see that she's related to Chris Cornell, or at least it seems plausible. The shape of her face, the way her eyes look, her dark hair. I don't know. For some reason with Chris Jr., I'm having a hard time here. Now, blonde hair can obviously skip a generation. But neither of Chris Cornell's parents have blonde hair as far as I can tell. We've seen pictures of them. Though there's a lot of mystery surrounding his parents as well. We know very little about them, especially his father. So your father doesn't have blonde hair. Your grandparents don't have blonde hair. Your paternal grandparents. Vicky Cornell's parents are impossible to find pictures of. I mean, if you can find it, please send it to me. I couldn't find anything. I asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT admitted that it's very difficult to find out information about Vicky's background, probably because she's from some kind of, again, multi-generational crime family. And we're just not supposed to know about all that. Okay, she's of, I guess, Greek ancestry. So there may be someone blonde on her side of the family, but I kind of doubt it. Now, let's be fair. Sometimes your hair will change color as you get older. When I was younger, my hair was lighter. However, this is very blonde. I mean, that is a blonde child. And this is the same guy, the same child growing up, obviously. And as I look at this picture, I'm noticing something kind of interesting. So look at her hair. You see how she's dyeing she has it dyed. I mean, it's very beautiful. I don't know what you call that, but notice how the bottom of her hair looks the same color as the top of his hair, which has obviously darkened as he's gotten older. Or does he dye it? Because this is obviously not her natural hair color. Her hair is very brown, very much in the vein of her mother and her father. But his hair has gone into almost like a dirty blonde, to where on some angles it almost looks brown. But look at the bottom. Like, it almost has a similar treatment that hers. Now that just might be someone who did both of their hair before they went up there for this shooting, whatever this was, some kind of Grammy or something. But obviously he is still a blonde-haired person. But I just wonder if he's dyeing it a little bit to tint it slightly darker, so that people don't notice the contrast between his hair and his father's. So, this is what, to me, gave the possibility of Vicky Cornell sleeping around. This is what gave it a little more credibility to me, and why I felt it was worth mentioning. Because, I don't know. I mean, that is blonde hair. Both your parents don't have any blonde hair. Paternal grandparents don't have any blonde hair. Greek side, questionable. I think he has blue eyes. Doesn't Chris Cornell have blue eyes? So, I mean, there's something there. Chris Jr. does have pretty full lips. Cornell has pretty full lips. Compare the noses. I mean, I see it more with Vicky. I don't know. Maybe it is his kid. I'm not saying this is conclusive, but the hair, to me, is a pretty big tell. One final point I want to make about all this, and this is a pretty important point, is that a lot of people, they want real clean, cut and dry explanations. And there isn't always a real clean and cut and dry explanation. And sometimes there's multiple reasons things are done. Like I got done explaining earlier about how Vicky Cornell, stood to benefit. That doesn't necessarily mean she was, that it was her idea to off her husband. Maybe it was someone else's idea and she went along for her own reasons. And she was just okay with it. That doesn't make her a saint, obviously, but it also doesn't make her directly the killer. And the reason I'm explaining that is because this whole business of how this, the entertainment world and when people are really famous and rich, how there's this kind of dark satanic undercurrent. I do think that sacrifice is needed for these people. And I'm not discounting that whole theory that, perhaps that is an aspect operating here as well. And as I said earlier, when we don't have a lot of information, when information is withheld or very difficult to get, it takes a lot of work to connect dots, and it's not always rewarding. You don't always find what you're looking for. Sometimes you have to admit that you were what you were looking for just wasn't there or may not be there. So I just wanted to make that point that all this talk about whatever child trafficking, whistleblowing going on, and that being a reason for some of these murders, I don't know if that's the case with any of this. This all could be a ruse, but at the same time, that doesn't discount the reality of the situations with the child trafficking and such. There's a lot more regarding the whole story about silent children and other people involved with that, but you should really just go watch those videos. Zach goes over it really thoroughly. I didn't want to cover all the same stuff he's covered. I just wanted to cover the stuff that I felt connected dots with what I was seeing and some points that I wanted to make separate from that. I feel like I don't need to say this, but maybe I should. I always welcome tips. I don't get a lot of email. And if you're afraid to email me, just comment in the comment section. And because I'm always interested in everyone's feedback.